All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Steps to Starting a Cooperative, sponsored by Cooperation Works and presented by Margaret Bow. Margaret served as a cooperative development specialist with the USDA Rural Development and Cooperative Services from 1998 to 2025. She's assisted in the formation of over 40 cooperatives across her home state of Wisconsin in industries as diverse as long-term care, ownership conversions, the forest products industry, distributing local foods into regional institutions, arts, marketing, and galleries, disability services, and employment among people living with mental illness. Margaret will be inducted into the Cooperative Hall of Fame on October 8th, 2026. Congratulations, Margaret. Based out of central Wisconsin, Margaret now volunteers her time as a national resource on cooperative development. Over to you, Margaret.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining today to do a little deeper dive into the actual steps of forming a cooperative. Next slide. So we're going to do this in three areas. We're going to do a very quick overview of what is a cooperative, and then we're going to go through the actual steps to starting a cooperative, and then we're going to talk about factors that increase your chances for success in forming a co-op or being a co-op developer. So next slide. So let's go over the co-op basics. So here is an official internationally recognized definition of what is a cooperative. A cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. And if that sounds like it was written by a committee, you would be correct. It was written back in 1995, and it's currently being updated. And it brings in so many different aspects of what is a cooperative to people worldwide. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you a definition that at USDA Cooperative Services that was created probably about 40 years ago that better contextualizes that international definition into the ecosystem that we have here in the United States from both an accounting and legal perspective, especially. So a cooperative is a business that is owned and democratically controlled by the people who use the services of that cooperative. So three hallmarks. It's user owned, user controlled, one member, one vote, and the benefits go back to the member owners in proportion to how much each member owner used the co-op in the previous year. Next slide. There are roughly about 40,000 cooperatives, and there's various types of co-ops, and it all comes down to who are the member owners of that particular cooperative. So the most common type of cooperative are what are called consumer co-ops, where a cooperative will provide a good or service that people use. Examples would be the rural electric co-ops, housing co-ops, grocery or food co-ops, housing co-ops. Second most common are the producer co-ops, and that's where a group of farmers or artisans come together to jointly process, market, distribute, what have you, anything to get their product out to the market and to support their farms or their artisan businesses. Shared services co-ops are kind of in the background, and they are owned by individual business members, individual nonprofits, or individual government organizations to provide services to support those businesses be independent. For instance, Ace Hardware, that is not a franchise. That is a number of individual businesses that have voluntarily come together in a cooperative to do some joint marketing, distribution, warehousing that allows little mom and pop stores to compete with the big box stores. Then we have the worker cooperatives. there are not as many. There's roughly about 1,000 in the United States, but that is probably an area that has quite a bit of interest going on right now. And that's where the employees of the business co-own it democratically through the cooperative principles. And then an interesting variation on the theme is what's called a multi-stakeholder cooperative, in which you have two or more different classes of owners co-owning the business. So in this particular case, the Chippewa Valley Health Cooperative is is in the works right now, and it is co-owned by both the patients, the consumers, along with the health providers, the doctors, the nurses, etc. And that arose in response to a very sad closing of two rural hospitals, and people said, no, no, never again. We're going to own this, and we're going to do it as a co-op. So next slide, please. So now here we go into the actual steps of starting a cooperative. Next slide. So I'm a master gardener. I love gardening. And so I tend to think of things in flowers. And so there are 6 steps that are involved in more or less in forming a cooperative. And if you have to go through all these steps, not necessarily in a particular order, but there tends to be a little bit of order. But you need these steps in order for your cooperative idea to bloom. And we'll go through these steps: the idea exploration, whoops, back one slide, the business viability, legal structure, capitalization, starting operations, and then the ongoing co-op education and training. Next slide. Thank you. So any cooperative business, like any business, starts with an idea. But the key for a cooperative is that could a group effort address whatever issue, whatever business idea that you have. Next slide. So then, after the idea, whoever came up with the idea would start to explore the idea. You know, what is this thing? What is the actual business concept? Can the cooperative be the structure that meets that shared need that people are expressing? And then you would want to discuss the ideas in what I call a Margaret Mead group. And next slide. Margaret Mead was a famous anthropologist who had this observation. She observed that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So thank you to another woman that shares the name of Margaret for that insight. Next slide. So this small group of people that are sharing this idea and they want to explore that idea would start to gather some information. They would start to learn about what is this thing about a cooperative. They would learn about other co-ops in both their particular industry sector along with their geographic region. They would start to explore what are the co-op principles and values, which were covered in the previous recording about what is a cooperative. And then you'll want to look about what is ownership culture? What does it mean to participate in a democracy, which a cooperative is? Part of the gathering information, you'll want to identify some resources that can help your group. You might want to name a project coordinator, someone that will be the point person for everyone to bring information to, the person that will keep people on task, keep the meeting on task, keep things moving forward. And then you'll also want to identify who is out there in your ecosystem, in the community, that can serve as consultants from a perspective of cooperative development, of locating an attorney that is familiar with cooperative law, and accountants that are familiar with co-op principles as well. And you'll want to better define the business concept as you're going along through this process. Next slide. So as you're gathering this information, there are a few key questions that need to be answered. First of all, is it a sound business idea? A cooperative is a business. This isn't a hobby, so it's got to be a sound business idea. Is there an advantage to working together, or could an individual pull this off? And is it worth doing, putting the time and the resources into doing this? Will a cooperative make a major difference in people's lives and the potential member owners of this? And is this a business, not just a hobby? And I want to tell a little story. I had a neighbor named Arlene. Arlene was a little quirky and she was really into knitting. And in her retirement, she worked at a local yarn goods store here in my community. And unfortunately, the owner of that yarn store, it was her dream to have a yarn store, but she developed an allergy to fibers that were in the air, and she needed to close the store for health reasons. And so Arlene came bounding across the street one day to my house and said, "Margaret, could we save this yarn emporium store and can we do it as a co-op?" And I said to Arlene, "Well, um, is this yarn store and your knitting and the other people that go to the yarn store, are your livelihoods dependent upon this, or is this a hobby? Or is there some type of cultural reason that you're using this particular yarn that you couldn't get it from a local big box store?" And she said, "No, no, this is a hobby." And so we agreed that that probably wasn't her idea, wasn't a good candidate for people gathering together, going through all through the effort to buy out the yarn emporium and run it as a consumer co-op. So, so that's the difference between a hobby and something that is vital to your livelihood or to your cultural sense of identity. Next slide. Another thing that I feel is critical to any type of cooperative is having a thorough discussion about what your mission and values are. This is time well spent because inevitably, about a year and a half, 2 years after you start operations, you're going to face some type of roadblock. That's just business, that happens. But if you have not spent the time of coming to a consensus of why you're doing this, you'll face that roadblock and you realize, "Oh, wait a minute, I thought this co-op was about this, and you thought the co-op was about that, and you thought, oh dear, oh." If at least when you're facing a roadblock and you can come back to those shared mission and values, you can use that as a touchstone to look at your options of going forward, um, so that you remain true to who you are. So let's go on to the next slide. So after you've had that discussion amongst your small group of what are your mission and values, you'll want to open this up to a wider audience of potential member owners. And that's when you would hold an exploratory meeting. You would present the concept. If there's interest amongst the people that have gathered, you would form a steering committee. Um, Something that I have learned the hard way, don't just pass around a piece of paper and ask people to sign up for the steering committee, because oftentimes you'll need a set of skills, and a lot of times busy people aren't just going to volunteer to do something. You kind of have to do a one-on-one invitation, identifying, oh, this particular person has a lot of credibility in our community, and this person knows a lot about this industry, and this person has good organizational skills. You'll want to identify what are some of the skills that you need for this steering committee as you move forward, and make a personal invite to those individuals. Another thing that would happen at that exploratory meeting is to ask for some earnest money, to some initial funds, making it very clear that there's very good chance that people would not get this money back because it would be used to cover some initial organizing expenses. And frankly, it's a good indicator of how serious people are in going forward with the cooperative idea if they're willing to put some money towards further moving forward. So next slide. So to recap, in the idea exploration phase, you've got that initial idea. The people with the initial idea will start gathering information. They'll have a thorough discussion about the mission and values of why they're doing this. There will be an exploratory meeting, and from that exploratory meeting, forming of a steering committee to move this further. Next slide. So another petal in the blossom of your cooperative idea is exploring business viability. Next slide. So there are two very important aspects to business viability for all cooperatives. You'll want to conduct a feasibility study and a business plan. Oftentimes, with an individually owned business, you could get away with just doing a business plan. But because this is a joint venture and there's more at stake, you'll want to do this two steps of doing a feasibility study and the business plan. And in a feasibility study, you're looking at, is this concept, is this industry a viable idea? And in that feasibility study, there will be an industry analysis looking at market potential, some of the technical aspects that might be involved with your cooperative idea, capital requirements, some financial projections, and some what we call scenarios of what's the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, and what would be so-so. And it's very important that this feasibility study be conducted by a third party that is knowledgeable about this particular industry. So next slide. So after that third party comes back with information, the steering committee will have reached a decision point. And there's two things to consider. Is that business concept viable? And is there still excitement? Is there still enthusiasm to move forward with this? If there is, if both of those factors are a yes, then you would proceed to the business plan. But if either one of these is lagging, stop. And that's okay. Because there's nothing worse than proceeding head on with an idea that's not viable or that enthusiasm is lagging. So let's move on. So next we will conduct the business plan. And the business plan is about providing details about your particular cooperative venture. You'll be describing the product or service. You'll be developing more of a marketing plan. You'll be talking about the specific management and organizational structure for your cooperative, and you'll come up with a financial plan. A lot of this information would be taken from the feasibility study, but made into your local context. And the business plan can very much be conducted and written by people involved with it, by the steering committee or friends or family of the steering committee. So feasibility study would be independent. The business plan would be a little more closely held. Next slide, please. So after the business plan is completed and the information comes back to the steering committee, there's yet another decision point, whether or not to move forward. There's three factors. Does the market look promising? Does it look like the members are still interested or there's still enthusiasm? And if the capital chances look reasonable, then you'll want to proceed to incorporate. And if not, again, stop. And that's okay. A cooperative business that isn't sound or that doesn't have the market potential or what have you, it's not worth pursuing. So let's move forward. So next, we've covered the idea exploration, we've covered the business viability. Next, let's talk about legal structure to support the cooperative idea. So you're moving forward, and there's several legal documents and policy documents that need to be drawn up. You'll want to create bylaws and articles of incorporation, and you may have a subcommittee work on the bylaws, answer some key questions, helpfully working with your local friendly co-op developer in reviewing some of these. Have those the aspects of the bylaws and the articles of incorporation reviewed and written by a co-op attorney. You'll want to select people that will actually sign the articles of incorporation and become the initial incorporators of that cooperative. Oftentimes it's the steering committee, and they will serve as the interim board until the cooperative is able to hold their first initial general membership meeting to formally elect people to the board of directors. And you'll want to incorporate within a state. If your state has good, sound cooperative statutes, you can go ahead and incorporate in your state. If your state has kind of fuzzy or non-existent co-op statutes, you have a couple of options. You can either incorporate in a neighboring state or a state that has good, solid co-op statutes, and then file as a foreign business in your home state. Or there is an option you can incorporate as a limited liability company, also known as an LLC, but make sure you work with a co-op attorney to write up your bylaws in such a way that it very much keeps you, that you operate on a cooperative basis. That LLC, it's a little looser. I would prefer that you incorporate either in your home state or in a state that has good co-op statutes so that you have more guardrails as you move forward. But it's always an option. Next slide, please. So you want to have that organizational member meeting with the people that are to be potential members of the co-op. You'll present the findings of both the feasibility study and the business plan. Hopefully there will be good questions coming from the people that may become member owners. At that member meeting, you would have a discussion and actually adopt the bylaws. You would elect that board of directors and collect membership equity, their people's investment in this cooperative business. Next slide. So we've gone through a lot. Idea exploration, business viability, the legal structure. Now it's time to capitalize your business. There's various ways to capitalize a cooperative, and I've listed several of those there. Most cooperatives will use many of these options. You can have equity by members, either initially or ongoing. There could be transaction fees to pay for ongoing expenses. If it is a producer co-op, for instance, I'm based in the state of Wisconsin, we have a lot of dairy co-ops. And so we use something called a per unit retain for dairy cooperatives, in which there's some type of surcharge on each 100 weight of milk delivered to your dairy co-op, some type of surcharge on each item sold through the co-op. If it's a worker co-op, there could be some type of hourly withholding for the workers. You could also do an equity drive in which you can offer stock, both common stock and preferred stock. If you're thinking about preferred stock, be sure you're working very closely with an attorney that is familiar with doing that type of work. And like any other business, you can examine subsidized loans, perhaps grants for particular aspects of what you're doing. There could be loans from individual members to the cooperative. And then as a final resort, market rate loans from a lender. Next slide. So a lot of work has gone on. Now it's time to actually start operations. Next slide. So when it's time to actually open for business, there's a lot of startup activities that take place right before the doors open. You'll want to look at different insurance products, both business insurance and board liability, directors and officers insurance, any licensing that may be involved, workers' compensation if the co-op will have employees. You will want to either hire or contract with someone that would be a manager. And then the manager, as outlined in the previous, what is a co-op? The manager is the person that would hire employees as needed. And then acquiring any type of facilities and equipment that your co-op would need. Next slide. And then the last point that we're going to touch upon is ongoing co-op education and training. So this is critical because this is a group effort. This is jointly owned and governed. And so education, training, and information is critical in a group effort. Education means reinforcing that shared vision of why you are in business together. Because oftentimes the initial incorporators, they've got a lot of enthusiasm and they can clearly articulate who they are and why they are a co-op. But the second generation or the third generation on may be a little more fuzzy and maybe a little further removed from some of the market forces that went into why they formed a co-op to begin with. It's important to keep revisiting that. Training. Every co-op needs ongoing training so that the member owners have the skills to understand both the business and the financials, and also what it means to participate in a democracy and to make decisions and who does what within the cooperative. And then because this is jointly owned and operated, information. Uh, People need good information and to be able to understand that information to make sound business decisions. And so that member owners are truly engaged in their co-op. They're just not, it's not just not a convenience. It's just not like going to a big box and buying there. Next slide. So how long does it take to organize a cooperative? That's a fair question. The shortest I've ever seen it is with a shared services co-op. The people knew each other quite well. They were loggers, and they were going to form a shared services co-op to buy lubricants and fuels and tires and that type of thing. They knew each other. They knew what they were doing, and so within 3 months' time, they were up and running. Um, Oftentimes, it takes a little bit longer depending on the complexity of the co-op, 2 years. With some of the retail food cooperatives out there, they can go on for many years. They can go on for 5, 6 years. Um, we're going to touch upon some of the factors that can support success for co-op development. So next slide. So here's a summary of those steps. And let's move on. Okay, so some of the factors that can increase your chances for success. So cooperatives are all about our people organizations, and you'll want to get networked because you want to avoid predictable first-timer mistakes that any cooperative or any co-op developer, quite frankly, can make. It's important to get learn from each other. There's a benefit. In the previous talk, we talked about the 7 cooperative principles, and there's something called Principle 6, shortened as P6, and that is cooperation amongst co-ops. And believe me, after having formed many a new co-op, you'll want to really tap into that network of people willing to share information, willing to share policy documents, willing to share aspects of their business plan, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. Tap into that network, get together with other co-op developers. And you want to avoid that special snowflake syndrome that can happen when people form an organization, form a co-op in isolation, and they don't realize that some of the issues that they're facing, they think they're the only ones that ever had this. But if they were networked, they realize, oh yeah, that happens, and that's how this group felt with it this way. In this group, they have this suggestion for you: get networked. And some examples of networks: da da da, Cooperation Works, the National Network of Co-op Developers and Co-op Development Centers. There's something called the Cooperative Professionals Guild, and that photo that you have, Cooperative Law 101, that is from the Cooperative Professionals Guild. It is a group of attorneys and accountants that are specializing in cooperatives and that are networking and sharing best practices. And you'll want to keep your ear out of who's involved with that. And often they do have some trainings that you could tap into to learn from them, and frankly to use their professional services as you move forward. And then there's also something called the Association of Cooperative Educators, ACE. The ACE is having their annual institute in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Tara is deeply involved with helping to organize that upcoming institute. It's a great place to learn about what's happening in Canada, the US, and Puerto Rico. So next slide, please. There's something interesting that's happening within the field of cooperative development, and we're starting to see more specialization within industry sectors. For instance, the retail, grocery, and food co-ops have formed something over time called the Food Co-op Initiative, FCI, and there's also a group of consultants called Columinate that have really specialized in this industry that have a wealth of knowledge. If you're doing anything with food co-ops or grocery co-ops, you need to get connected with FCI and Columinate. If you're dealing with home care worker co-ops, which I've had the great privilege of working with over my career, um, and this is primarily women that go into the homes of the elderly and people with disabilities to provide personal cares and cleaning services. And there's a consulting group called the ICA group that really understands this industry well, and something being formed called the Elevate, which will be a support network specifically for this industry. For the worker cooperatives, something that is formed from the grassroots about going back about 20, 25 years ago. The Democracy at Work Institute, a nonprofit that supports democratic workplaces, and the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. Again, this is great information. This is great networking. If you think you've got a unique situation, tap into them. You may find out that others have gone through those issues before you, and there's some lessons to be learned. And then there's within people that are specializing in converting existing businesses into worker cooperatives. There's something called the Workers to Owners Collaborative and a number of other organizations that are really doing a deep dive into supporting this movement, which is quite prime as the baby boomers are reaching retirement age, and there's a wonderful opportunity to see those businesses convert over time to work cooperatives. Next slide. Oh, I just wanted to touch upon this. You know, if you think about converting an existing business to a cooperative, you would think that it would be, there's just a few little nuances that are different than the generic steps that I shared with you of forming a new cooperative business. Very similar to the steps I just outlined. However, in about 95% of the cases, it's the owner, the owner of the existing business that will do that exploratory phase and the business viability phase, and then introduce the idea to the employees. Oftentimes, the first reaction of the employees is like, oh my God, are you kidding? No way, no way. It takes a little time for the employees to, wait a minute, settle down. Wait a minute, oh, maybe we could do this. And they would form a transition team in which both the owner and the employees and a co-op developer and some other consultants would move through that process. There's some great resources. Look to a website called Becoming Employee Owned and the Workers to Owners Collaborative. Next slide. There's something else that we're seeing commonly amongst co-op development centers, and they will facilitate cohort learning and organizing in parallel with one another. It's something called a co-op academy, in which there will be multi-week information sessions, and I have an example there from our friends at KDC, Keystone Development Center, that serves the Mid-Atlantic region. And it's an opportunity for entrepreneurs, co-op entrepreneurs, to initially explore ideas in parallel with one another as a cohort. Um, Keystone Development Center, the Northwest Co-op Development Center does these. There's a couple other organizations that are doing this this coming together as a cohort, learning as you go, as individuals or small groups are forming a co-op. Then there's something called a co-op accelerator, and that is taking a proven idea to scale for wider application. And there's a group called start.coop. If you Google that, there's a lot of great information about taking a really great idea and trying to go regional or national with it. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I'm a master gardener. I love gardening. And I want to share with you an analogy between incubating a cooperative and growing tomatoes in a greenhouse or under a grow light in a northern climate, like in the state of Wisconsin. Here in Wisconsin and other northern states, our growing season is way too short. If we were to put a tomato seed into the ground, we would never see the fruit before frost comes along. But that doesn't mean that we can't grow delicious tomatoes. What we need to do is start those tomatoes in a nice, warm, gentle environment under a grow light with a heating mat. Just the ideal conditions for germination and the early stages of that seedling. And then you would plant that seedling outdoors once frost has passed. But the key to making that work is to harden off the plants before putting them directly into the ground. You'll want to expose those, those coddled seedlings that had the ideal growing conditions to gradually exposing them to sun, wind, and rain. And if you put the plants out too early, they don't do well, they die. But so I want to share with you that analogy to co-op development. Next slide. So if you want to incubate a cooperative, a sponsoring organization would conduct those initial co-op organizing steps. They would select a viable industry. They would conduct the feasibility study and the business plan. They would probably create those legal documents. They'd be looking at securing financing. And then they would start to recruit potential members to become members of the cooperative. They would provide training, not only in the industry, but also what it means to be a cooperative. And they would gradually transfer responsibilities and ownership to the members over time as specific milestones are achieved. Next slide. There's some definite strengths to the incubated approach. What I see is that people with limited business experience can enjoy shared ownership. For member owners who are very busy people, may have a few resources. It's a way to speed up the development process, to have less exposure of risk for them, and frankly, to avoid burnout that can happen if you're going through a multi-year process. If potential members are recruited and they only go through several months of process rather than years, people may be able to stick with it for a longer time. And for the sponsoring organization, they can really promise focus in on promising industries that they happen to know well. It may increase the chances of that supporting organization to repeat the process with more groups of people over their service area, and they can start to foster networking across co-ops so that there's increased success. Next slide. Some of the weaknesses of this incubated approach, members don't necessarily develop a deep industry knowledge. They haven't been through the multi-month, multi-year process. And there's a danger of just being convenient membership mentality. When the going gets tough, they might exit rather than sticking it out, like if you had gone through the entire process. For the sponsoring organization, we have found that the transfer of responsibilities from the sponsoring organization to the co-op can be a bit fuzzy if good milestones aren't identified ahead of time. And for the co-op, it takes time to build cohesion and trust. And that can be fragile as a tomato seedling that is exposed to the sun and gets sunburned way too early. Next slide. So some examples of incubated co-ops, the Arizmendi Bakeries in the Bay Area, very successful model. It's been around for 30 years. Alex is in the region. I defer to her how many years it's been around. Very successful worker co-ops out there. Senior housing co-ops, that's a fascinating model that really has taken hold in the Twin Cities. It's very much real estate developer driven, and the real estate developer will do all the organizing and construction and finding the capitalization and making it happen, and then they're willing to pass it off to the member owners who go forward and make it happen. Another incubated approach. I can't help myself from sharing this. Um, Rural America did not have electricity, and the FDR administration, during the depths of the Great Depression, they instigated the REA, the Rural Electrification Administration. And within a 15-year period of time, 90% of rural America got electricity. That's amazing. That is amazing. There was low interest loans provided by the federal government. And then it was interesting, the Indiana Farmers Bureau said, "Hey, federal government, you just can't write out a check and expect this to just happen. You need to help foster the co-op development as well." And so the REA helped to identify and have local organizers happen at the local level. And then once these little co-ops, these nascent co-ops were formed, REA actually had circuit riders, two types of circuit riders that would go out and monitor the accounting and the engineering. And over time, these little nascent co-ops started to form statewide associations and then a national association. And the role of the federal government way backed off. Within 15 years' time, 15 years of incubation. That's amazing. Just planting that seed, master gardener type of thing going on. Next slide. I could go on, but I'm sure there might be questions.
So I'd asked some folks to drop them in the chat, and it's been a pretty quiet group overall, but we did have one come in from Gary. That goes back quite a few slides. But Gary asked, have you come across ways to get equity in communities experiencing poverty?
Oh boy. um, Takes a lot of coordination. Um, it takes a lot of networking. And that's why I really brought out that incubation idea, because especially for low-income people, for low-income communities, there needs to be a little more greenhouse situation and then gradually bringing them on. And part of that greenhouse situation is working with community partners that can help think through some of the capitalization. Because low-income people, I mean, it's important that individual members contribute to the economic um, outcomes of their cooperative. These are businesses, but in a realistic way. I mean, low-income people doesn't have the same resources as a well-established farmer in a farmer cooperative. So that's why I spent time, rather than just going through the co-op steps and say, go forth and make it happen. Especially for low income, low resource communities, you really need to get networked. And that's why it's so important to join organizations like Cooperation Works, to be part of the training that Cooperation Works provides, to get resourced with the Association of Cooperative Educators, to get in touch with the Cooperative Professionals Guild, other organizations that are thinking through these issues to support this. Good question, Gary. There's not an easy answer. It's all about building that ecosystem.
We have some space for some other questions if anyone has any lingering. I know there's a couple questions that came through about the slides and the recording. So just we'll be uploading this to YouTube and sharing out the link with folks. And then Margaret, if you're all right with us sharing like a PDF of your slides out with registered folks, we can do that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe if people, yes, that is a Janelle Orsi sketch. Yes, that is. Maybe if people feel comfortable, would people be willing to identify either in the chat or to go off mute and maybe just chat about some of the ideas that they're exploring?
We just had a question come through from Stephanie that is asking, what were the organizations for sector support for food co-ops? Food co-op initiative, and what was the other?
I'm sorry, and when I turned in the slides, I'm like, I didn't put in. It's a group called Co-Luminate, like illumination, Co-Luminate. And if you, I mean, some of those members, they have decades and decades of experience in the food co-op industry. And just some people have specialized in oh gosh, in financial management and others in member recruitment and others in produce departments and you name it. There's some people have really specialized new co-op development, expansion, what have you, recovery. So yeah, Columinate, great group of consultants. And they themselves are a co-op, a worker co-op doing this.
We have a
Ah,
question that just came through from a couple folks in Hawaii at the beginning of the learning curve here. How do you best bring people together who do want to learn? Locally, this is happening on Hawaii Island with farmers, but could use help co-facilitating.
okay. Um, yeah. Hopefully you're in touch with Kelly Teamy. They're Foreign Co-op Development Center. I forgot which island she's on, but I have I've interacted with people that have done co-op development in Hawaii, and they talk about in Hawaii there's something called a talking story about creating space and time for people to share their story as a way to really listen to one another, but also to build trust and cohesion over time. Um, we often say in co-op development, people ask, well, how quickly can we move forward with co-op development? How quickly can we form this co-op? And frankly, co-op development proceeds at the rate of trust. How much trust has been developed amongst people? Um, I feel very strongly about taking the time and really developing a shared mission and values of why you're doing this. And at USDA early in my career, I was considered a bit of an outlier because everyone else was doing agricultural co-ops, and here I was doing the home care, and I was referred to as, oh, that's Margaret. She does the non-ag co-ops. I'm like, that's pretty broad. That's like saying the non-credit union co-ops. I mean, come on, what the heck? But I would really emphasize the vision and taking the time to build connections. And that was kind of dismissed as, oh, that's touchy-feely stuff. Well, time spent doing the touchy-feely stuff and building that cohesion and talking story and learning from each other is time well spent. So I don't have any easy answer for you in Hawaii, but I think culturally you have some things that you can tap into as you move forward. Alex made a wonderful observation. The art of co-op development is equally as important as the science of co-op development. Well said, Alex.
And it looks like we just had a question come through from Carmen. Our team is looking into a housing cooperative for individuals with disabilities near Raleigh, North Carolina. Any resources and connections are welcome.
Yeah. And Alex and Tara, feel free to chime in. But there's some interesting work happening in the housing co-op space. And we all know housing, especially affordable housing and workforce housing is in very short supply. And There's an experienced team out of New York City that has over 50 years of experience with housing co-op development in low-income communities in New York City. And they are taking their knowledge and sharing it nationally. The Cooperative Development Foundation is also compiling information of some good practices, some good alternatives for housing co-ops. So it's there's another network. There's a network of people that are really focused in on housing, and you'll want to tap into that. Alex or Tara, if you feel comfortable chiming in on that.
Well, I just shared a couple of potential resources in North Carolina, and not necessarily specifically to housing co-ops, but Carolina Common Enterprise, which is in an interesting state right now, but Thomas Becket potentially could provide some interesting insight and expertise. And then there's Poder Emma, which I believe does do housing, but I think that I forget exactly where they're located, but they might be sort of
They're
hyper
in
local, and
Western,
I'm not sure if they work in
yeah,
Raleigh. So,
yeah,
um,
they're Western
yeah,
Morganton, that area. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I can try to think of a couple others too. And Tara, I don't know if you want to hop in on that.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. And then we were running a little low on time, but we've got one more coming in from Gary, who is building a worker-owned co-op for worker training and work in the power industry. This is
Ooh.
in South Dakota with very high unemployment in some communities. Are you just looking for some resources, Gary?
Yeah, resources would be helpful. I come from a union background, so any ideas? We've been talking to a number. We're primarily focused on our tribal communities, so being able to find ways to connect with that. We've had good conversations, but just continuing to develop it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something called union co-ops, and there's a group of people that are very much at the interface between unions and co-op development and how they interact. You might want to get in touch with the union co-op folks. The worker co-op folks, they're very well networked. I think they would be very interested in what you're doing in South Dakota. U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, Democracy at Work Institute. Um, so you're looking at training as well as co-op development.
The the part that's unique is we have really horrific trauma around school within our tribal nations, and then building like the long term vision is to build power like sovereignty to be able to own power infrastructure. But by building the infrastructure initially on non tribal lands, but there's an existing 5 week pre apprenticeship program that the unions have that we might work with them or we might work similar, but just because of the different opportunities within tribal communities, the unions oftentimes aren't the right fit. But being able to find that pathway where we can build something that really serves the community, builds that infrastructure internally, so is that, for wind power, for solar, that there's really an understanding about how to get started, how to have that infrastructure, and then to really like share those resources and concepts across tribal nations, because there's a lot of times people are dealing with the same challenges over and over again, similar to what you've described with the co-ops.
Yeah, 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 yeah. For what it's worth, I'm going to share somewhat parallel to what the home care worker co-ops did, the very first home care worker co-op in the South Bronx in New York City back in the mid 80s when the whole welfare to work stuff was going on with the Reagan administration. And so it was a lot of low-income women, uh, recent immigrants, people of color, and they were expected to quickly get off of welfare and get into jobs. And so what they did was they had a parallel track. They found money to provide a month worth of earn as you learn type of training to become not only certified nursing assistants, but also to learn about patient advocacy and what it means to be a co-op member in participatory democracy. So they get paid for about 4 weeks of training. And then if they pass the training, they are offered employment through Cooperative Home Care Associates, a worker co-op of home care providers. Um, so it's been an exciting model. It's worked extremely well for them. But it has taken a lot of work to maintain that training program, the grants that it takes to make that happen. But that learn to earn with the guaranteed job at the end of it through the co-op is a wonderful combination.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for coming and talking about the steps to starting a cooperative. A little bit about more about us is Cooperation Works is a national network made up of organizational and individual members working in co-op development. So for those of you starting cooperatives, we have a link in the chat, and we'll send also a link to our members in the follow-up email. They're all across the country and are great people to reach out if you're looking for additional support in some of these steps that Margaret talked about. We also have training for people interested and who are supporting co-op as co-op developers. We have our building blocks training, which is two parts. It's virtual and in person. The virtual piece starts June 11th and runs to July 7th. And the in-person training, which will be held in Providence, Rhode Island, runs from September 20th to 22nd. And you can find some more information in the link in the chat. Thank you again, everybody, for joining this webinar, and we hope you have a really great day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Get networked.
So, bye.